My name is Bert Weber, and I get the chance to talk to you first. So can you hear me clearly? Everybody? Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. Um, Today's talk is mostly about a book called Islands in the Salish Sea, um, a community atlas. And this is a book that's been one of my favorites for years. Well, for maybe I'll introduce myself. I have been a teacher at Western since 1970. So how many people were alive in 1970? Just a few older. And I haven't actively taught in classes for quite a few years, and it may show. So I apologize if I stumble over words. It's kind of scary to be back in front of an audience. Okay, The Islands in the Salish Sea is a book that was written by one of the people who will talk today, Sheila um, Harrington, who right now is in Victoria, thinking about what it's like in Bellingham. And she is the person who is the editor of this book. So she had an incredible amount to do with the book and its success afterwards. It's a wonderful book. When I get kind of depressed about what's happening with the environment, I usually go to this book. It's a picture book. And what can be wrong with a picture book? You don't have to use a lot of words, but there are lots of words in this too, not just the pictures, but they're a different kind of picture. These are pictures that are maps. And when you think of a map, how many maps do you know of that are also paintings of really good quality? That's what the maps are in this book. And our task today is to learn a little bit about the Salish Sea and to also check in about the book and the images on the book. And Olivia, who's talking there, I'll introduce right now. Olivia is a recent Western graduate who is a whiz with computers. And I went to her and Sheila with the idea, could we take the images from this and provide a way that people can see them easily? I.e. in today's language, that means put them on a web page. And she is an absolute whiz at computers, and holding our hands took us through this whole project and is directly responsible for what we're going to see this afternoon. Okay. Any questions anybody have at this point? Just to, yeah.
Sir, that book, can you buy it somewhere or store? Can you buy it somewhere?
Oh, yeah, it went out of print quite a few years ago. And so the only place you can find them is on the secondhand book market. That's where I got this one, but they're dicey, $50. So they have quite a bit of value, but they're well worth it if you can have it for a lifetime. So the first I want to do is the kind of almost ceremonial recognition of this place being native lands. And I want to give you a little bit of background about that. People have been on the Salish Sea for almost at least 13,000 years. The clearest evidence we have of people arriving goes to that time period. Okay, and so what we call now the Salish people, arrived soon after and have been in these waters for well over 7 to 8, 9,000 years. And in that time period, it took a little while because when the sea was first formed, it was pretty muddy. It was a glacier that was retreating, and they are messy situations if you've ever been around them. It took quite a few thousands of years for the waters to clarify to the point that they became good salmon habitat and other marine resources. But once established, at least 5,000 years ago, the Salish people lived in these waters, had fights, had lots of support for each other, and just did well. And that takes us to about 200 years ago, just a tiny bit of time in this frame. 200 years ago, the immigrants started from the early 1800s. Immigrants from around the world flooded into this area to privatize and commodify the resources that are there and start the kind of economy that we see to this day that does not put environment at number one. So those days, okay, catch my mind here. So 2,000 years or 200 years ago, things changed very quickly. There's a quote that goes to George Vancouver, who was here in 1792. He says, "The King of England has authorized me to see that all the sites that I have, all the places I have seen, all the places that I will see, and all the places that I am, will be owned by the King of England." Easy to do. He just said the words and the land was taken away. And if Salish people today have any kind of complaint, it's because, as one of my favorite elders of the Salish people said, they just came and took it away. They didn't even ask, they just took it away. And so that's a part of recognition that I'd like everybody to keep in their minds about this place that is our home now, and that we, to some level or another, are responsible for the stewardship. This book is a model of stewardship. It takes the kind of resources that we treasure as people and puts them into a context that you can appreciate. Something that is a beautiful painting has more power than a bunch of words. So that's going to be what we look at today. Okay, I've already introduced Olivia, who is really the brains behind this thing. And now I would like to say a little bit about this place that is the Salish Sea that is ours. And Olivia has a map up there. You see on the upper right with Sheila watching below that you see the upper night where there is a body of water here that has three major names. One of them is Puget Sound, even though that's kind of cut off. The other is the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and the other is the Strait of Georgia. All right, the Strait of Georgia is what we're particularly interested in today, because the islands that are the topic of this seminar occur mostly in the northern part. And unfortunately, this map doesn't show them all that well, so we can't look at them individually. However, when you look at the site on yourself, there is a map that you can make bigger and will show you where the islands are in the Strait of Georgia. The ones that we're working with mostly on the northern part of the Strait of Georgia, where Sheila and all of her friends who put this book together live still. So that's the area. One thing I would like you to look at and keep in mind is that area around Vancouver, because there's one thing that I would like you, from my point of view, to remember when you finish this, and that is that the Salish Sea is an estuary. And maybe you've heard that. Estuaries have rolled around in people's minds, but it should say, okay, that's something worth learning about. And the estuary that we have and the Salish Sea is mostly driven by the Fraser River. And you can see the Fraser River up there just by Vancouver. It is responsible for a total about 70% of the fresh water that comes in to the Salish Sea. It's a big one. It's second only on the coast of North America to the Columbia River, which goes into the ocean outside of the Salish Sea. But the way that the fresh water and the salt water mix creates a current. And it's a kind of complicated one we won't go into, but the net effect is that the surface current goes out, the deep water comes in. And that surface current is huge. It's as much as the fresh water that the Columbia River puts out each year. So it's a major, major movement of the water that we don't notice, doesn't come into our view very often. But the results of that estuary flow are the rich kind of biological resources that make the foundation of the food sources that we all treasure. So what estuaries are, what are the keys? And if you have any inclination to study them into the future, do it, because they're really fascinating places. All right, now, I know there's one more thing rocking around in my mind. I would like to tell you a little bit about the climate that is in the Salish Sea. That's one of the attributes of it. It's a moderate climate. You think of the climate of Victoria or Port Townsend. They're places that things grow in very well. It's a climate that doesn't have a whole lot of rain or snow, despite what we have outside now. It's a kind of place that Vancouver, when he was here in 1792, said, what a wonderful place for people to live, or words to that effect. So the quality of life in the Salish Sea and primarily in the Strait of Georgia is due to the fact that we have this estuary pumping nutrients into the system and creating large amounts of biological material that we use to eat. All right. So I think that's about all my time. It's going to cut me off here soon. Yeah, okay. All right, there's one thing that is a fascinating topic, and that is, and still kind of controversial, is the naming of the Salish Sea. You know, as you all know, we used to have three names: Strait of Georgia, Strait of Juan de Fuca, and Puget Sound. And those are the ones that we thought had boundaries. And what scientists have learned about the estuary is that it's all one kind of body of water. And so it needs a name. And the science came in the early part of the 2000s. It was really a outgrowth of Earth Day in 1970. In 1970, the government woke up and said, things are not so good. The children are out protesting, which maybe it can happen again. And so, but ran away. Okay, so that in the early 2000s, science got to work and develop a whole lot of information saying, we don't have three bodies of water, we have a single body of water. And that word went around, and I was an advocate for getting the word out. And so in that early 2000s or so, the Salish people who were on a really important and intense request and to try to get more power over the resources. And they didn't. They sort of lost out by the time that, well, that's a whole nother story. I'm going to leave that aside. It's a fascinating one. But in this case, the Salish people came together from both sides of the border and said, in 2007, because the times are important here. In 2007, they said, we independently name the Salish Sea, that all of these waters in the three bodies shall be called the Salish Sea. And another one, they said with it, is that they shall be sacred. We shall consider them as sacred. And so, as you know, that didn't really change a whole lot because the state of Washington and the British Columbia and the two governments of Canada and Washington were also considering naming it. And in 2009, 2010, they did so. And it sort of eclipsed and way overpowered the work that the Salish people had done. They got overlooked again. So it's not that names weren't important. This is one of the maps that comes out of the book by Sheila. That it's one of the Wasanic Nation. That's down by Sydney, sort of a little bit outside of Victoria. And this tells you an area of it. If you can see Victoria there and the Harrow Strait and other kinds of parts that are geographical. And these are a list of the names that the Salish people had adopted for those areas. So they were not adverse to names, and they used names, not quite as much as the way we do, but quite a bit anyway. And on the left-hand side, that's Stephen, what's his name? I can't remember. A Salish member from Victoria, who Stephen Point, who in 2000, this was 2009, when the Salish people all came together and had a big party just outside of Victoria, being excited about the name. But again, it's come with those kind of reservations that these white guys are just pushing around again, which is a kind of sense that happens often. So I would like you to sort of take away, rather than the kind of short snippet that you get at the beginning of a talk saying, we want to acknowledge we're on their land, but not going to take any responsibility for it. So think about it, if you would, when you come across those, that it's a deeper kind of more complicated issue. All right, Olivia, your turn.
Sheila's turn.
Oh, Sheila's turn? Sorry. Sorry, Sheila.
That's okay, Bert.
Mhm.
Is this clear? Does people hear me here?
No.
Am I heard? Can someone acknowledge? Am I being heard?
You can hear me, Sheila.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay,
I have
great.
my hearing aids in, for heaven's sake.
So I presume people on the webinar call can hear me. Okay, so thank you, Bert, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Bert, for creating this website. In fact, it's Bert that had the brilliant idea that we should take this book, which has been out of print for quite a long time, and take the maps and put them on a website. So we have Bert to thank for what you're going to see in a few minutes. I have been working in the Salish Sea region for all my adult life. I've spent about the last 30 years working with land trusts and working with other environmentalists, protecting areas as much as we can. And the Salish Sea is definitely my home. I'm a sailor and I just love all the islands. I also have a husband who is from Bellingham, so I have a bit of a cross-border interest myself. And this project was developed when I was working with the Land Trust Alliance of BC, and we have the Land Trust Alliance of BC to thank for their permission for having these images up on this website, and for Touchwood Editions, who is the publisher who made the book. And of course, the whole thing is only possible because of all the incredible artists that got involved, and I'm going to tell you about that in a few minutes. So in 1999, Judy Stevenson and Bryony Penn were sitting around talking about the new millennium. Okay, so we have a whole millennium change happening, and what is it that we can do that can mark this period of time and represent it in terms of what's the baseline? What do we have here now? And so they kind of started brainstorming about that. And then Bryony said, hey, let's bring Sheila in, because she'd worked with me on another mapping project that was called Giving the Land a Voice, Mapping Our Home Places, which taught people how to map their own properties ecologically. So I came in, and Judy and I became the coordinators of the project. Judy got some incredible, great funding for us. And so we were able to give the artists and the coordinators that we brought together in time a little honorarium. And so we were off and running. And so what we did, the first thing is oh, I'm missing. I want to go back to the why. I'll get to the what in a minute. Okay, the why. because we have a shared history here. We have shared stories of what's gone on these islands. Now, of course, you know, mostly the maps in the book are from the colonial period, but there are a few Indigenous contributions to the atlas. And of course, if this was to be done today, there would be a lot more of that. But a map is kind of like a story. It tells a story of certain kind of values. And as you'll see when we go through some of these maps, you can do that in so many different ways. And of course, what the values are that you want to represent is also something that's very diverse. So when we got this project together and made all these maps, we ended up recognizing we have this incredible shared territory. And as a result, we have a sense of belonging here, not just on our little islands or our little places, communities that we belong, but the broader perspective of we're in a shared territory. And of course, having worked with Bert, I'm really expanding this idea of our shared territory being the Salish Sea. And in fact, when we decided to name the book Islands in the Salish Sea, there were a lot of people that said, what are you doing? You know, that's not going to fly. Nobody knows that. And that was, of course, at the turn of the millennium. So it hadn't been officially named that yet. But Bryony insisted that, you know, Bert was the one that was pushing that name, or not pushing, but, you know, introducing the idea. And so we acknowledge him in the book for that, and we went ahead and named it that. So even that was an act of claiming the whole territory and acknowledging and honoring the Salish people whose homes, as Bert has said, so well presented, have been here for thousands of years. So we made these new connections, and we were able to provide all kinds of new information through these maps. And as a result, we had this sense of cherishing the islands. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the future. Oh, and this map, before we move to the next screen, sorry, I just take a second to look at this map from Gambier Island, which is just a little bit east of Bowen Island off of Vancouver, actually one of the least populated islands. Is just an exquisite map, as you can see, with the owl on the right and the eagle on the left, and then all the features down below of some of the habitats and creatures. This was, you know, a beautiful map, and represents some of the other maps that you'll see in a few minutes. Okay, Olivia. All right, I'll get to the what. What did we do? Well, so Judy and I, and with lots of help from Bryony and Kathy Dunster, who is also integral to the project. She's got a lot of history behind her. She's a landscape architect and just an amazing person. And so we all brought together a couple of potential coordinators from each island and had this workshop together. And we discussed what were the threats on the islands? What did we need? What were some of the successful things that were going on? And we found we had this shared context. We also brought in scientists from the Data Conservation Center who showed us some of the endangered species that were around and how they were represented. And then we discussed, okay, what are we going to do? So we ended up establishing a coordinator for each island, and then they were to go back to their island, draw their community together in whatever process they wanted, to gather the data and the themes that they wanted to represent for this project. And so they did many different ways. Denman Island, for example, ended up with about 7 maps. Salt Spring has 5 maps. This map here that you're seeing is one of Salt Spring's maps. It's an agricultural land map. And and you'll see when you get through to the website, because all the maps are there pretty much, the different themes that were chosen. Okay, Olivia. Okay, this is the some of the hows. So I was talking about the why and the what. This is the how. So we had so many different styles of maps that were made. This first one on the left is Quadra Island map that's made by Leanne Hodges. And she did an amazing thing with this map. She used a chart behind it, and then she had recycled pulp paper that she added onto it. There's some fishing line in there. There's shells in there. There's all kinds of things that she added on to just bring it to life. And a strong advocate of Quadra Island at that time. She's moved to a couple other islands since then. she really felt like this project had an opportunity to move people, and in fact, it did move people tremendously. So that was one method of making a map. And then the next one over is Bryony's installation. So we had maps from the individual islands, but then we had some regional maps for the whole area. And this is one of them. And you'll see more of that when it's Olivia's turn, because you can see it from all different sides. It's got different paintings all around it. An amazing map. And here's two more different styles of maps that were made. On the left, we've got one, this is Cortez Island. And believe it or not, there's 16 images of Cortez Island on that map, 8 on the top and 8 below. And each one of those represents a different aspect of Cortez or different values of Cortez. And when you go on the website, you'll see that not only do we present the maps, but we present the text from the artists and the coordinators also. So you can see what are those different values that are represented in that map. And then over on the right is a silk hanging that was made by Kath and Jesse on Salt Spring Island. And this is representing the watersheds of Salt Spring Island. So you can see there's just all kinds of different ways of representing something through map. It doesn't have to be on paper. And you'll see another one when Olivia comes up that was a carving made by Herb Rice, who is a Penellicut artist, incredible artist. And so he made a carving. Okay, so once all these maps were made, they were we brought them together into an exhibition. And here's a couple of photos from the exhibitions. On the left was the launch of the book. And so this actually was on Salt Spring Island. So all the maps themselves are actually quite large. And as was this installation here. And so we brought them together. We had 3 different exhibitions. The one on the right is, I think, the one that was in Vancouver. And we also had a guest book at all the exhibitions. And so we had all kinds of responses from the people who saw these maps. They were just enthralled and felt like, gee, they'd woken up to the larger territory that we live in, and also really understood and recognized the fragility of where we live. And actually, Bryony's installation there is really about the fragility of the ecosystems. Okay, a couple of other things is that in the end, you know, after the book, of course, the book brought all of this together, the atlas brought it all together, but a couple of other things that happened is, like, for example, on Savory Island, they made placemats out of their map. And then over time, since the first one was done, they've made about 3 or 4 new ones that show different things, like it's a sand dune ecosystem there on Savory. And so they talk about sand dunes and what are some of the species that live in a sand dune. And another one that's all the flowers that are associated with it. So they really went further than the original map in time. And many of the original maps ended up being purchased or donated to hang in their community halls. So it's a long-term, it's there for the public to see long-term. And it inspired other maps and, of course, conservation efforts. And there on the right is actually a new map. It wasn't in the book. This one was made just last year. Not just this one. This one says a conservation area secured as of 2022, but there's a matching map that goes with it. That's areas that were secured as in 2000. So over those 22 years, you can see the difference. What has happened since this book has come out? All the lands that have been conserved since then. And it's astounding to see what has happened in 20 years. And it's beautiful to see that. And I'll just show you for a minute. Those maps are in this new book that I put out called Voices for the Islands, 30 Years of Nature Conservation on the Salish Sea. Little plug for my new book. Okay, next. Okay, so if there's other communities, and I know there are other communities who would like to do a similar type of artistic community mapping, I put together a few ideas about how to go about that. Just ideas. Of course, the first thing you would do is gather other community members from your community and, you know, get together, have meetings, lunches, dinners, and talk about it. And not just on a local level, but perhaps on a regional level, talk about the themes. And then you might think about selecting a coordinator for that area, because it's important to have someone who's communicating the timelines, the ideas, and who reaches out to the artists and figures out, is it going to be one artist or several, and what are the values that you're going to communicate through that art. And then possibly you might consider linking to a community event and doing an exhibition, because then it'll have a lot of impact. No rushing, though, I want to suggest, because of course the maps take, a long time to put together, because it's portraying a lot of information and doing it very artistically. We've had one new map join the project, and we're looking forward to perhaps more coming. Protection Island, which wasn't in the original atlas, is now up on the website that we're going to see in a few minutes, and that's exciting. And it would be exciting to have some more maps from the Juan de Fuca area and from Washington. It would be lovely to have some more maps to add to this selection that are from the area, the bioregion of the Salish Sea. All right, I wonder if there's anything I've missed out. No, I think I'll just go ahead and hand it over to Olivia, who's going to show you how to navigate this wonderful new site.
Turned my mic on. Can everybody hear well enough? All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Bert and Sheila, for introducing all of the background for this project. It was really exciting for me to be able to get involved at this stage. Obviously, Bert and Sheila were working on this 25 years ago when I was 1 year old. So it's been really exciting to have my own way of getting involved. The Explorer site itself was built using ArcGIS online tools, story maps, and experience builder. If anybody is interested in those, we can talk more about that in the question portion. But it's been really exciting. Since we launched the site in late November, we've had more than 2,000 views from more than 6 countries and counting, so share it, make it go viral. We've got that QR code there if you'd like to scan it with your phone, or you can go to the link. I will say there's improved functionality on desktop and tablet where your screens are just a little bit bigger. It works on your phone, but it's better to look at it on a bigger screen. Before I go into the actual tour of the site itself, I just wanted to talk about how spreading mapping projects to more communities would be a really fantastic result of all of this work. If a project like this were to happen in my area, I would be really excited to get involved. It seemed like a fantastic way to get people grounded to the places where they are, connect with other like-minded individuals, and create something really unique and really special. And like Bert and Sheila have touched on, I think emphasizing the Indigenous histories, cultures, and storytelling would be a really beautiful way to expand it and make it grow even more. All right. With no more ado, let's actually go to the Explorer site. So here we are. The link is that bit.ly/Salish Sea maps. The capitalization on the S's is important, so keep that in there. But it's basically 3 sections. We've got an overview. This has a handy dandy table of contents down here for easy navigation, but we have an introduction to the community mapping process generally. So if you want to learn about values and how to maybe orchestrate a community mapping project, there's resources there. We have an introduction to the Salish Sea region for viewers who may not be familiar. And then we have a deep dive into the community mapping process for this particular project. So if you'd like to learn more about how it all came to be, that will be your chapter. But let's jump over to the Explorer itself. So here we have, I'll give you a brief overview. We have some Explorer instructions, so if you want a step-by-step walkthrough, you can use this and it will be easy to navigate, but since I'm here, hopefully you don't need that. We have that map that Bert was talking about here, so you can zoom in and out and learn about where the island you're learning about is actually located. We have our list of islands down here at the bottom. You can click on one of these islands for whichever one you're interested in. For now, I'm going to hop over to Main Island. And once you've selected your island, the map will automatically go to where you are learning about. And then we have the maps, of course. So for example, this map by Tina Fermillo, this shows the Salish Sea calendar on the border. We've got the local slugs from the ecosystems on there. We've got some boundaries and more spatial data stuff here. And this is a good example of one of the maps that has a lot of information layered all onto one. But like Sheila was saying, we have some maps that have many and many. We've got Salt Spring Island over here. Whoop, let me jump back there. And this is one that has multiple, like we were saying earlier. So this one, if there are multiple maps for one island, you can use these arrows from side to side. And then once you've found a map that you want to learn more about, you can click on this zoom in and learn more button. And this is cool because all of these maps are interactive. You can zoom in as far as you want to go to see all of that detail that the artists worked so hard to achieve. And that's also especially useful for maps like this one by Briny Pen, which has lots of text. So you can get all of those details. And then, like Sheila mentioned, if you want to learn about the artist or the coordinator or the themes and values that they wanted to show on the maps, we have this About This Map button, which shows all of the commentary and resources for each map. Really quick, I wanted to highlight one that Sheila had mentioned, and that's Penelakut Island. This is a wood carving done by Herb Rice, who's a Coast Salish native artisan on Vancouver Island. And I think this is a good way to show how digitizing this atlas, but also staying true to its original forms of fostering stewardship and those goals that were associated with it. So we have this intricate carving, and you can zoom in and see the grains of wood, which is just beautiful. But you also have this audio recording that Herb created to accompany it. So this is Herb speaking and telling a traditional story from Penelakut Island, and you can listen to it while you're admiring his work, which I think is really special. And then, like Sheila said, we have room to grow, so we can add on islands as they come. This protection island was created in 2019, and these artists were inspired by the atlas to create their own project. And we can, keep growing. We can add pages and buttons and just add more beautiful works of art to this website. And then finally, I'll mention on this final section, there's the Regional Map Explorer. So these pieces were created by artists who wanted to emphasize the interconnections between all of these islands. For example, we have this Protecting a Rare Island Paradise, looking at protected sites throughout the region. To flip back and forth, we use these big arrows on the side here. There's this beautiful marine life, Salish Sea marine life map by Tina Spalding, where again, you can zoom in on all of these and really see all of these beautiful details. And let's jump over to, here's the conservation area maps that Sheila was talking about, the secured as of 2000, and using these smaller arrows, secured as of 2022. So you can compare those. And then finally, I'll brag about Bryony's work here. So this is that exhibition that she made. She used the toilet to represent urbanization and also the separation of humans from our own waste production and how those are both threatening the Salish Sea ecoregion. And because this is a multifaceted piece of art, we've got to give you multiple angles to look at it. So we included all of these various ways you can view it, and these are also all zoomable. So you can explore these as you will. I encourage you to go to every island, look at every map, read about every artist. It was really beautiful to think through their processes and be able to format these and appreciate their art while I was doing it. There's way more here than I have time to show you, of course, but I hope you get a chance to poke through it, get inspired, and I'm glad that these maps are now able to inspire and continue to influence conservation work, restoration work, creativity in this region, like the book did 20 years ago. All right, so we can hop back to this page if we'd like, but for now I'll go back to the presentation. Really quick, this is the link, so write it down if you want to share it with your friends and your families and your coworkers. And then we also have this email here, so if you have questions about starting a community mapping project, resources from Bert or Sheila or any of the other people involved in the original project, feel free to reach out, email, and we can hopefully provide some guidance and resources and start another project. It would be great to see it just keep spreading. All right. I think we are opening it up for questions. So I know we maybe have some online, or if we have ones in here, and I'm going to do my best to repeat the questions so everybody online can hear hear everything. And Sheila, if you want to turn your camera back on too, we can have you up here as well. All right, yeah.
What's the email? I didn't get that part. And also, as far as the time it took to make the maps, how long did you make that program as far as the maps and the thorough?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So there's the email, just in case anybody missed it. And then as far as how long it took, Bert reached out to the company that I work for, Blue Water GIS, at the start of this previous summer. So we worked together with Sheila all through the summer season. Gathering up the maps from all of the artists and making sure we had all of their permissions was a pretty large chunk of time that Sheila dedicated a lot of energy to. And then as far as how long it took, this was actually my first time building a website using what's called Experience Builder. And so there were a lot of learning curves and lessons and troubleshooting processes. But overall, I think we started building in maybe late June, and we launched officially in late November. So it was a months-long process for sure. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Bert. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll repeat the question really quick. We have a question about the artists and their background. If the artists had a mapping or GIS background, or was it more of a connection through art, if I'm phrasing that correctly. And I feel like Sheila or Bert are probably best to answer that. All right, Sheila, if you want to jump in at that question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just found the Q&A link and I was reading a question there, and so I missed what you said. Could you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. So as far as all of the artists that were involved, did they have a mapping or GIS background, or were they more artists, or what were the kind of bridges and connections you made between those two interests?
Yeah, well, some of the artists were also biologists or ecologists, and so they had that, but some of them were not. They were just straight artists. And so they got together with their coordinators, and then whatever format they used to gather the data on their island, and then they went to work and made their maps. I'll just actually, an example on Bowen Island was that the community, they ended up taking like a time capsule and gathering all these ideas about what was important into this capsule. And then Kathy Dunster made the map using all the words that were gathered from the whole community into a map. So yeah, the artists were, various. Some of them straight artists, some of them that's their profession, and some of them no, that wasn't their profession, but they had the means to make the maps. Oh yeah, there's the Bowen one that I just mentioned.
Perfect. All right.
And I see we do have a few questions online.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've got somebody here who can kind of go through them, and then we'll repeat for the, yeah. All right.
Okay.
Was saying that they print and sell at the general store some of the maps, but
Gotcha.
they're wondering if there's an original design file that's more usable because they're.
Yeah. So Sheila, somebody on Saturna Island said that the general store sells copies and prints of some of the maps, but they were curious if there's a high resolution, high quality file that we could share with them so that they can produce a higher quality print. So that is definitely.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that and get
Email that Salish Sea 25@gmail.com and we can connect you.
So I think, Bert, you said that there was a Salish name for the Salish Sea before Washington called it the Salish Sea. What was that name?
No, there wasn't.
Was it like 2007 they came together and came up with a name for it? Did I interpret that wrong?
No, that's correct. In 2007, leaders from both the First Nations and the tribes came together. And not only did they name the Salish Sea, they created a nation, the Salish Coast Salish Nation.
So the Salish Sea is.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
We were just reviewing the Salish Sea origin, name origin, and how it was created in 2007. Alrighty.
Question for you, Olivia. Someone asked, could you talk a bit more about your process for creating the website in Experience Builder? I'm a new user of Experience e-builder, and it's quite complex but fascinating. It's tricky to blend story maps and experience builder. They work well together.
Yes, for sure, my fellow GIS nerd. So the questions about how using Experience Builder, what the process was, combining them with story maps and building the site. Experience Builder is a relatively new product that Esri on ArcGIS Online has released in the last year or two. And it's tricky to learn, but I think with practice, now that I have done this project and we're working on another Experience Builder project as well, now that I have had some time to poke around and learn what works and what doesn't, it's starting to come more easily. The story map actually is embedded into the Experience Builder, so that was pretty easy as far as integrating those two. But yes, it'll be interesting seeing how Experience Builder adapts and updates as they continue to build it out. It was complicated, but worth it, to summarize. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So the question is, for the original project, how did you find the artists? Were they reaching out to the coordinators? Were the coordinators reaching out to them? And that'll be a Bert and Sheila answer.
Yes, well, the coordinators were definitely working hand in hand with the artists. I think I answered that.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of people involved. You know, that the whole concept, it made people interested in it, and who knows what kind of sharing of information occurred before the artist finally put it on the print.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, do you plan to include video, for example, possibly oral histories or interviews for the project?
Yeah, the question was if we plan to include video footage or oral histories, more audio recordings, things like that. And the answer would be absolutely yes. It depends on the availability of that. For the scope of this project, we weren't able to go out and collect new material to include in this other than what was sent to us through artists and coordinators and things like that. But in the future, if this project is ever revisited or if new projects happen, including more of that immersive multimedia stuff, if it can be gathered, would be really cool. Highly recommend going to that Penelakit page and listening to the recording while you're looking at the map. It's really cool. Yeah.
Some folks have to get going. I'm sure they'll stick around if you have some questions. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and actually you can look at the
Well
book.
done.
Oh,
Go ahead, Sheila.
I just wanted to mention that you can access the book through the Land Trust Alliance of BC's website now. It's a flip book, so you can't get in close like you can with this fabulous website. But just this summer, they did create that and put that online if anyone wanted to look at that.
Yeah, good note. All righty.